Alrighty, everybody, here we are. I told you I was going to give you a video review for the exam, and so I'm here today to do so. Uh, that blank wall behind me used to be had some knickknacks and the pictures up there, but we've taken them down because we're moving to down toward Wilmington May 1st. So my wife's already packing, which I totally understand. It's better to get it started early than to wait until the last minute. Uh, having my coffee at home, just like I do in classroom, right, guys? But anyway, I set up your study guide. I set up your study guide online, so you have those set of concepts, and most of the exam comes from those concepts. The best way to study these is, I think I said in the email, is to uh, put make sure you touch base with the definition for each of these concepts, and then look at some examples for each of these. Because a lot of your test questions may be example to answer, or I may give you the concept and you give me the correct kind of scenario or example. So you want to make sure you know the definition and know examples of these. And when I say study these, another way to think about this, or a study strategy, is to study around that area where it's in the textbook. Don't just look at the definition and say, okay, that's what that definition is, and just say, okay, let's try to find a little example. Read around in that area where that concept's coming from, so that you get the full picture of what we're talking about. Because the questions can come from anything related to that concept. You've had my test enough now to know I don't tend to simplify exam. Some of my questions I simplify, but a lot of them are looking at these concepts in depth to as great extent. I'm testing to see what you know about it, so try to know as much as you can. That said, I'll make this not a very long video. I'm just going to go down through the concepts again and just sort of read through. And if I felt the need to make a comment about some of these, I will as we go. So I'm just going to go, but maybe it helps just to have the visual here and walk you down through some of the concepts that's going to be on the test. Again, the chapters 7, 8, and 9. We're looking at poverty. We're looking at issues of race and ethnicity, and also gender and sexuality. So that first chapter on poverty, you're going to want to know, what is poverty? What is the official definition of poverty? Look at some of the rates of poverty in the United States. Look at some of the reasons why, some of the postulates that are put out there about why poverty exists. And of course, I have some of those theories listed here. So what is poverty? What is the official poverty line, for example? So read all about that aspect of poverty. I asked you that. The second one is, what is the official poverty line? So check that out, look it up. Then I want you to know there's several dimensions of the poor. Several categories. So you're going to want to touch base with all of those. So who are the working poor? The people that are working poor, they work, make a minimum wage, and still can't make it. The working poor. There's also the next one. Who are the near poor? And those are people who are not severely poor, but they're close to it. Of course, we don't want the near poor, even, well, not really working poor, but near poor. You could even think of, as I was showing in the video, of middle class folks that fall into poverty. That it's not just the extreme poor, but even professional folks who, for whatever reasons, fall on hard times, and they have a high mortgage, and they have car payments and other payments they have to pay out, and they just can't make ends meet. and they need so in some sense that's near poor as well. Uh, then the next one is, who are the severely poor? And the severely poor are those who are at the very bottom. And these are usually your homeless folks, people that have been unemployed for many, many years, maybe. They really don't have any resources. These categories are kind of relative to some extent. You know, we talk about being poor because I can't afford to have some of the luxuries that I used to. Money doesn't go as far as it used to, but that's a far cry to severe poverty. You know, at least a lot of folks may still have some contacts with family members that can help, or they have other resources they can pull upon when they need it. But severely poor are people who, you know, basically homeless. You know, those who have addiction problems and severe poverty. They live in very severe conditions. Then you got problems with government poverty measure. What is the problem with the government's measuring poverty? What is it that the government does not measure? And those items are in the chapter. Problem with census counting the poor. What's the problem with in the census in terms of counting the poor? Who gets left out? Extreme poverty neighborhood. What is an extreme poverty neighborhood? Check that. Who are the old poor? Who are the old poor? And that's another category. And again, looking back, the old poor, the poor of the standard old poverty, of the old poor. Check that category out as well. A relation between racial problems and the structure of society. So looking at racial problems and the structural determinants of problems along racial lines. Then 11, what is a dominant group? The dominant and minority group are in relation to each other. So what are the characteristics of a dominant group? What is racial stratification? You know, you have stratification by wealth and income, social class. Then you have stratification by gender, and we also have the society is stratified by race and ethnicity. So, in this terms, race and ethnicity are structural categories of our society, and our society is divvied up scarce resources along ethnic racial lines, if you will, just as social class stratification or gender stratification. What is a minority group? So look at the definition of a minority group and have examples. I'm sorry, I repeat myself here. Number 15. When did the U.S. Census allow for the multicultural identity box? It used to be just simply other, but now they've changed it, and it allows for multi-ethnicity or multi-race identification. So when did that take place? What is an involuntary minority group? And what is a voluntary minority group? Involuntary minority groups are groups that did not volunteer to be in their minority status. And these are usually the groups that were racialized early on, like in the agricultural period of the United States. So, involuntary means that they were forced into their minority status, such as slavery, segregation, removal off their lands with Native Americans, the exploitation of Mexican Americans in their lands, taken off their lands, and then made to work on their lands that were taken. It tends to be that involuntary minority groups experience more extreme forms of discrimination and prejudice, much longer lasting in historical terms, much more intense and longer lasting discrimination over time than voluntary. Voluntary minority groups are groups that May have had negative push factors or pull factors, but nonetheless, uh, they're able. For example, the European immigrants are the sort of the is sort of the icon of voluntary minority groups. At least they came over freely. At least they may have had some resources. Certainly, having just the ability to have your family intact would be a plus, right? Or having family here already that you join once you got here makes a big difference. So, voluntary minority groups, while they may experience prejudices and discrimination, it's nowhere near the extreme for involuntary minority groups. Let's go on. What is the largest assimilated Asian American? I'm sorry. What is the largest Asian American group in the United States today? I'll let you look that up. What is a racial formation? Look at that concept, racial formation. What is a racial formation? 19. What is an ethnic group? Racial groups, analytically, if we're speaking theoretically, a racial group is a group that in theory, that the differences based on perceived physical differences. An ethnic group is differences based along cultural lines. Of course, all groups all groups that we talk about are in the chapter are ethnic groups. Some ethnic groups have been racialized, and those ethnic groups that were racialized, if you look at the history, where all three were the major three were involuntary minority groups, and so they were ethnic groups. Still are the basis is still ethnicity. So when we talk about African American, the differences between African Americans and say European Americans or Asian Americans, cultural differences. So differences in people's values and beliefs, and differences in interactive styles. I mean, you can get very looking at the everyday situation. Excuse me, but those differences are culturally based. They're not racially based. There's no genetic basis for cultural differences. It's just that some groups have been racialized. And I think we've already talked about that. So what is an involuntary minority group? What is it? Okay, going on down. What is an ethnic group? The ethnicity is based in cultural differences. So, for example, Jewish Americans are thought of as an ethnic group. Once were thought of as a racial group under Nazi Germany, but they're thought of today as an ethnic group, and that ethnicity, that difference in social identity, is based in religion, for example. And then to bring things up to a more modern, postmodern stance is what is a racial ethnic group? And that's getting right at what we were talking about. And then 21, what is institutional racism? To distinguish between individual discrimination. What is institutional racism? That's racism that's practiced, whether intended or not intended, along institutional lines. So slavery is an institutional racism, and there's other examples in the books that study that. What is individual racism? So I asked that question. And then 23, what are biological deficiency theories? The biological deficiency theories. If you think they're old hat, they came up recently. They've come up reared their ugly head again with some of the conservative politicians. One most recently in the last 2 weeks was talking about the inner city. And number 24, we have a cultural deficiency theories. He was blaming their poverty on their culture, and so putting the cart before the horse. Instead of looking at the history of inner city structurally, they blame it on the victim's cultural background, and that happened. I'm not going to name the politician, but it's one of the more vocal ones that we see a lot on the evening news. Was using a cultural deficiency theory. It's good. There's many reasons to learn these concepts, not just take on a test, but in your life, you see these things come up, and you recognize, oh, I know what this guy's up to. I see what I read I studied this in my social problems class with Dr. Spivey, right? Then question 25 we have here. Tip. It's not question, but study tip. What is sex? And here, what I'm asking is, what is the meaning and the difference between definition of sex and gender? Sex is a biological reality. One is born biologically male or female. Gender, however, is a cultural phenomenon. One's gender is how one is raised. Gender roles, characteristics, gender characteristics, how one is socialized to display certain behavioral and physical and characteristics of that particular gender. For example, when you dress up a little boy in blue, you're already socializing that boy into proper colors for a little boy, and pink for a little girl. You're socializing the little girl already in what colors are appropriate for them. That's simplifying a little bit, but I think you see where I'm coming from. So gender is what one learns in one's culture about how to be a male or how to be a female in the culture. Just one other point, they tend to go together because parents tend to socialize their children in a way such that their gender identity or their gender roles will fit their sex. But certainly there are examples. One can be born male and grow up and have a female gender identity through socialization. One can be female and be socialized to have more characteristics or display more character. We all, both sexes, we all have the same characteristics. We all have this, what we label masculine and feminine. We have both males and females. We all have the potential for all characteristics. It's just some we are socialized to. If you're a male, you're in our culture, you tend to be socialized not to be a very sensitive person, to cry in public, to be very nurturing, even though males are, and we certainly have the capacity. It's just that that's seen as feminine, and so we tend to display more aggressive behavior and other aspects of being male in our society is rewarded more so than the other. And that's how these gender, the concept of gender polarization. That males do think and dress and act like this. Females look and act like this, and it's polarized to some extent. Though there's certainly a lot of room for play there, as we know. What is male dominance? Study what is male dominance. 28. What is compulsory heterosexuality? Compulsory heterosexuality. Study that one. And let me get back to what I said, sex and gender. That some boys, for example, born male might be socialized in a female gender identity. But I'm not speaking to homosexuality when I'm talking about that. My opinion, and I have opinion of a lot of other most social scientists that I know of and have read about, homosexuality is a genetic, is determined at birth. It's a genetic determination. It's not a cultural learning pattern. You don't learn to be homosexual. You're born with that biological urge. Our sexual urges are biologically based, and so whether one is heterosexual or homosexual is a genetic determination. What is male dominance? What is compulsory heterosexuality? What is sexuality? So study that. What is patriarchy? Right? That's a patriarchy, a male-headed society. Men dominate. Right? So it goes on with male dominance. So study that. What is capitalist patriarchy? Particular definition here of capitalist patriarchy. check that out. What is feminism? Right? What is feminism? What is gender stratification? Again, we have really three major areas our society is stratified by, between from bottom up, right? So social class, race and ethnicity, and gender are three structural variables. Um, let's see here. Okay, I'm still going. Good, good, good. I had something popped up on my screen. I thought I lost it for a minute there, but we're almost done. Uh, also, well, let me see. It's popped up again. Hold on just a second, guys. Hold on. Okay, so I'm going off. I'm saving this, and I'll see you next week. All right.